Mr. Sergeant of Arms, invite the members into the chamber and close the doors. I hereby declare the House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee now in session. Will the members please stand? Will the visitors in the gallery please stand and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance? Representative Carringer will serve as chaplain of the day. Representative Carringer, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, it is truly an honor to stand before you today. My husband and I have recently joked that we live in a world that is so hectic, our watches have to remind us to breathe. I don't know about you, but sometimes it is hard to slow down long enough to catch our breath. And the worries and cares of this world can be pretty overwhelming. Fortunately, God's word has something to say about this. I'm reading from Psalms 46. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. Though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in an uproar. Kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice. The earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he has brought on earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. He says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress." So for a moment, I would like to ask you all to close your eyes, take a deep breath, and just be still before God. Dear Lord, we thank you that you are our refuge and strength. In our times of trouble, please help us to be still and wait on you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Representative Carringer will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Roll call.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 93 members present.
Let the journal reflect Representatives Byrd, Carter, Potts, and Ogles are excused. Let the journal reflect Representative Dixie is excused. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Welcoming and honoring.
Welcome and honoring Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If everybody will look up to the front desk, I know it's not COVID friendly, but I brought some Girl Scout cookies, and I'd like to honor my two girls who both won their troops for selling the most Girl Scouts. I wonder how that happened. So thank you.
Oh, come on.
Representative Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have a former member with us today, our guest, Timothy Hill, in the back here.
Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And hopefully here on the floor, though he might not be, he is. James Dunn is back here on the right. And ladies and gentlemen, James works hard for the House. He works hard for the caucus. And today is his 40th birthday. So y'all wish him a happy birthday.
Representative Powell, you're recognized. Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Monday, while we were conducting business on this floor, a unimaginable tragedy was occurring across the country in Boulder, Colorado. I was fortunate enough to live in Boulder, Colorado. Went to school at the University of Colorado as an undergrad. Had the privilege of playing football there. It's a wonderful community. Unfortunately, the community was terrorized and attacked with gun violence at a King Soopers, which actually I had shopped at and frequented when I lived out there, and 10 individuals lost their lives. I'd like to read aloud the names of those individuals and ask for a moment of silence. If I could. Officer Eric Talley, Ricky Olds, Kevin Mahoney, Lynn Murray, Denny Strong, Terry Laker, Trelona Bartkowiak, Jody Waters, Nevin Stanisic, Suzanne Fountain. Mr. Speaker, many of them, we know an officer who acted heroically and was the first on the scene, was tragically killed as a father to 7 children. Many of the other victims are parents or they were just now beginning their lives. I would ask that we all bow our heads in a moment of silence and pray for the community of Boulder and the families and friends of those who were lost. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Grills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very fortunate in my occupation when I get back home to get to work with my family. Not everyone gets that opportunity, and I'm very grateful for that. But my dad and my best friend, today's his birthday. He's 66 years old. I just wanted to wish Daddy a happy birthday, and I look forward to going home and having a supper with he and Mom because Mama's cooking. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Manis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to draw everyone's attention. Today is National Medal of Honor Day. National Medal of Honor Day began. The first Medal of Honor was awarded in March 25th, 1863. There are currently 69 living recipients. The oldest one in our state is Charles Coolidge, born in Signal Mountain, Tennessee in 1921. Mr. Coolidge will be 100 years old on August the 4th.
Thank you. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to honor a young lady from my district. She's a fantastic theater performer, loves her mom and dad very much, spends most of her time on the road driving to Nashville, where she is at the Nashville School of Ballet. And today she turned 17. That's my daughter, Lulu Carson Williams. Thank you.
Any further announcements? Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction to resolutions.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all resolutions properly filed be introduced pursuant to Rule number 17 in place of the consent calendar referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Joint Resolutions congratulatory and memorializing.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all Senate joint resolutions congratulatory and memorializing Lionel S. be placed on the consent calendar pursuant to Rule number 17.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Resolutions lying over.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all resolutions lying over be referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction of bills.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Bills 1,618 through 1,624 be introduced and passed on first consideration.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on first consideration.
Lear Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Senate Bills 20, 116, 129, 166, 209, 263, 327, 349, 429, 473, 574, 577, 592, 611, 626, 664, 693, 719, 731, 784, 786, 836, 849, 1,046, 1,156, 1,178, 1,227, 1,266, 1,269, 1,275, 1,286, 1,584, 1,589, and 1,597, transmitted by the Senate, be held on the desk pending third consideration of the companion House bills.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on second consideration. House bills on second consideration. Petitions and memorials. Reports from standing committees. Reports from select committees. Calendars. Mr. Speaker, the House has a consent calendar.
Chairman Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of the consent calendar on third and final consideration in keeping with Rule 50.
Gentleman moves passage of the consent calendar, probably second. Mr. Clerk, any objections been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no objections filed.
Anyone seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Representative Hardaway, you're recognized. No. Anybody else? Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After consulting with both leaders of the chamber, I've asked that those voting for House resolution on the first item today for National Medal of Honor Day be listed as co-sponsors. Thank you, sir.
Exclusions duly noted without objection, so ordered. Anyone else seeking recognition? Seeing none, we are voting on the consent calendar. All members in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays, one present not voting.
Having received the constitutional majority, I declare the consent calendar passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a regular calendar.
Call it first bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Joint Resolution 8 by Leader Todd.
Chairman Todd at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to roll this 2 weeks.
Without objection, roll 2 weeks. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 669 by Representative Freeman relative to disclosures by manufacturers.
Representative Freeman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 669 on third and final consideration.
Representative Freeman moves passage, properly second. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Freeman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This legislation is a clarification bill brought to me by the Tennessee Distillers Guild. Currently, there's nothing in the TCA requiring what percent ownership a minority owner has to own in the distillery before they have to disclose their ownership, which is an annual requirement for license renewal. The Distillers Guild and the Tennessee Alcoholic Beverage Commission work together in this legislation to make it clear that anyone who owns more than 10% must still provide the regular disclosure. It would only require the name and percent ownership of anyone who owns 10% of less. Additionally, there's a needed cleanup in Section 1 to fix an oversight in the 2019 privilege tax, removing legislation brought by the wineries that inadvertently impacted distillery storage law. And with that, I renew my motion.
Representative Freeman renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 669 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 77, 8 nays, 5 present not voting.
House Bill 669 and received constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 374 by Representative Caston and others relative to law enforcement.
Representative Cassidy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 374 on third and final consideration.
Representative Casta moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1 changes the deadline from 6 months to 1 year. Move to adopt.
Chairman Kershaw moves adoption amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Cassidy, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this legislation has to do with serving on a community oversight board. And if you serve on the community oversight board, you are to attend and complete a local law enforcement agency citizens police academy in order to get understanding and training on how the local police work. With that, I renew my motion.
Representative Cassidy renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the sponsor, what are the consequences if a member of the board does not get the training within the certain time frame?
Representative Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you look at the bill with me, Representative, you'll look on number 3 under Part B. It says a member who fails to comply with the requirement of this subsection serves as a non-voting member until that member completes the academy program.
Representative Hardaway.
And how does that member regain their voting rights?
Representative Cassidy.
Representative, again, let's look at that same section again. It says if they complete it, then they are, of course, regain their voting rights. It's in the bill.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And does this affect any other facet of the operations of the board?
Representative Cassidy.
No, sir. The bill is very specific, and it does not.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to the sponsor, I understand your concern for making sure that people are going through the training. Okay, I want to make sure that it's not the entire board, it's just that one member now, right? Okay.
Representative Cassidy.
So again, back to B3, yes, very specific, just to that member. And then to the representative's question, once he completes the academy, he is a voting member again.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. How long does an average citizens review training process take?
Representative Cassidy.
That's not relevant to the bill. I couldn't answer that.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know that some of these sessions are maybe 5 or 6 months in and of themselves because of people's busy schedules that this is a voluntary board. And so I'm a little concerned that if they miss one session, over a period of 6 or 8 months, they'll jeopardize their ability to vote. So have you considered that at all in this piece of legislation?
Representative Cassidy.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's so very important that an individual who oversees the police understands how it works. And so this doesn't deal with the police academy, duration, time, pass or fail. This only says that if you wish to take on this civic responsibility, you need to know what you're overseeing.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Sparks.
Thank you. Will the sponsor yield?
Representative Cassidy. Representative Sparks.
Thank you, Representative Cassidy, for carrying this. Members, I did a ride along with some of my sheriff's deputies last summer and got to just hear what they go through in their daily life and how they care about issues that sometimes we don't think maybe folks don't care about, like addiction, mental health. These folks do need our support. This is a bill that's a step in the right direction. I went through their Sheriff's Academy. I went through TDLC's Academy, TBI's Academy. I wish every lawmaker would go through their local police academy as well, or maybe do some ride-alongs. Some serious issues out there, folks, when we're having a hard time recruiting good officers. So thank you, Representative Cassidy, for carrying this.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor yield.
Representative Casta, he does. Representative Miller.
You may have answered the question. Would this class be online?
Representative Casta.
Representative, this doesn't deal with the police academy. It just says if you want to be a voting member, you are to attend. So I can't answer what the Citizens Police Academy, what they do or don't do, or how they conduct their business. I just don't know.
Representative Miller.
And these are sitting board members.
Representative Casta.
Yes, sir.
And you say you don't know if the courses will be online or in person. That's the question.
Representative Casta.
But it's the Citizens Police Academy, so what this legislation says is you are to attend the Citizens Police Academy, and that's all it deals with when it comes to that organization.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. As sponsor, how many police oversight boards are there in the state?
Representative Casta.
I don't know. I do not know that total number. If your community, 2 of the cities that I represent don't have this, and so you don't, that you would not have to attend.
Representative Casta. I'm sorry, Representative Mitchell.
So you don't have any in your district?
Representative Casta.
I do. I've got 2.
Representative Mitchell.
Well, I've just not heard anything from anyone in my district regarding ours in Davidson County, and I really don't appreciate you bringing this bill. Thank you.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Sponsor, just so I'm clear on the legislation, is it in the legislation? Maybe it is, maybe it's not, about the completion or missing a day in the Citizens Academy classes. Is that in your legislation? Okay.
Representative Casta.
No, it's not representative. It only deals with it. You are to take the class.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. So, on the merit of the legislation, I think it's a good idea for people to know what officers do. Before so there's a balance, and and so you have the full wraparound picture. The only thing I don't agree with about this legislation is the fact that you're doing it and not the locals. And because I think it's a good idea. And so because it's actually a good idea, I'm not going to get caught up in the minutia of the fact that you're doing it and not the locals. And I'm going to support the bill. So, thank you.
Representative Akeem.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chairman, CASADA, do I understand that if a member of the board or authority has not completed the training, that the authority of that board is not in effect until all board members are in compliance?
Representative Casta.
Mr. Speaker, if I could read this bill again, Representative, it's clearly stated in the bill, but let me read it because what the legislation says is more important. A member who fails to comply with that requirement of this subsection serves as a non-voting member until the member completes the academy. So it does not address, and so thus it doesn't affect the full board. It only affects that member who has not completed the course. Once he completes the course, of course, he becomes a voting member again.
Representative King.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the reason I asked that question on the summary or outline they have of the bill, if I understand it correctly, it says that the authority of the board is not in effect if all members are not in compliance.
Representative Casta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, sir. If you'll pull out the amendment and it's drafting code 004159, the amendment that Chairman Curcio made replaces that. So again, if you'll pull out your amendment packet, it's 004159. The amendment makes the bill.
Representative King. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your inflection didn't go unnoticed. But thank you, Mr. Sponsor. So just so I'm clear, I got a little murky there for a second. This would be for new members coming onto these clerk boards, or this retroactive for members that are already on the board?
Representative Casada.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, sir. If you look under number 1, section 8, capital A, capital A, it says each member serving. So in other words, it applies to those that are on the board now and those that will come on the board in the future.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Okay, and that's where you lost me. I can understand if it was, because we don't want. So if those members that are existing hadn't been through it, then what if all the members hadn't been through it? So it would really render the board ineffective.
Representative Casada.
Under number 2, it says that you have 12 months to complete the program.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And so you have 12 months to complete the program, but in that 12 months, you cannot vote. So, okay, just so I'm clear.
Representative Casada.
No, sir. The bill's pretty clear. You have 12 months to complete it, to attend. So no. So the boards would be active, and 12 months from now, if a board member decides not to go, then he is a non-voting member. But no, it does not inactivate the boards, and they are good. They got 12 months to start the process.
Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move previous question.
Previous question has been called. Any objection? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 374 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, as every member wish change your vote. Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 72, 21 nays.
House Bill 374, MC Constitutional Majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 107 by Chairman HULSEY relative to registration of boat trailers. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman HULSEY, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 165.
Chairman HULSEY moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 165, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman HULSEY.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 165 on third and final consideration.
Chairman HULSEY moves passage of Senate Bill 165 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Transportation Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman HULSEY, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We passed this bill last year, but the wording for it was a little confusing for county clerks. It deals with a dealer tag to go on a boat trailer that's being delivered across the country from boat manufacturers here. So we changed the wording to make it more amenable for clerks to understand it, and that's the bill.
Chairman HULSEY renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 165 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member casts a vote, as every member wishes to change a vote. Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 89, no nays.
Senate Bill 165 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 93 by Representative Garrett and others relative to time limitations on filing claims by the Bureau of 10 Care. Mr. Speaker, Senate bills on the desk.
Representative Garrett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute conform to Senate Bill 0761.
Representative Garrett moves substitute form Senate Bill 761, prop second without objection. So ordered. Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 0761 on third and final consideration.
Representative Garrett moves passage of Senate Bill 761 on third and final consideration. Proper second. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment Number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Jernigan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as Senate Amendment 1. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment Number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Garrett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is an administration bill brought to me by the Division of TennCare, and what it is that we are required by federal law to recapture any funds from an estate for a recipient that's received TennCare. And believe it or not, in my law practice, I know no other action that has an unlimited or no statute of limitations. The Division of TennCare has decided to limit those recoveries from an estate that a TennCare recipient has received those TennCare proceeds to 4 years. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I will renew my motion and take any questions as asked.
Representative Garrett renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 761 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
Senate Bill 761 and received constitutional majority. I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 486 by Representative Smith and others relative to railroads.
Representative Smith, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 486 on third and final consideration.
Representative Smith moves passage. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Transportation Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt.
Chairman Howell moves adoption of Amendment Number 1. Properly second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of Amendment Number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Smith, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Growth is good in our community. Some growth, however, has become painful because there's not a coordinated effort on growth and transportation. We need our partners at the rail system, but we're finding that more and more of the taxpayer roads have become blocked through obstructions over a delayed period of time. TDOT will now move forward with an existing resource of the Rail Authority in Washington, D.C. by aggregating all the complaints that are filed by various neighborhoods, report on an annual basis to the top 5 municipalities that are impacted so that growth plans can be determined on a local basis and resources can be allocated. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Smith renews your motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 486 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
House Bill 486 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 12 by Representative Hardaway and others relative to criminal offenses.
Representative Hardaway, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm going to ask that those who assisted in championing and guiding this bill through the House over the past couple of years would join me if they wish. Leader Lambert, Chairman Doggett, Chairman Curcio, and other members who assisted in April's act. Mr. Speaker, I move passage of House Bill 12 on third and final consideration.
Representative Hardaway moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1 removes the requirement that an officer must inquire whether or not a victim would like an offender to wear a GPS monitoring device. With that explanation, Mr. Speaker, I move adoption of House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kershaw moves adoption of Amendment Number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of Amendment Number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Hardaway, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. April's Act, House Bill 12. It creates a Class C felony for the sexual abuse of a corpse. One of the more horrific, horrendous, horrible crimes that you could imagine. I want to thank the family of April Parham for their unwavering efforts to move this bill. Mr. Speaker, order, please. I want to tell you how much your efforts have meant to allowing the family to find something close to closure. I want to tell you how this bill seeks to deter not only what happened to that earthly vessel of April Parham, but it deters a crime that, in this case, deprived those recipients of her organs. So there is an ongoing victimization of the family and those individuals who would have improved their quality of life or lived because April was donating her organs. Mr. Speaker, barring any questions or comments from my colleagues, I ask for a favorable vote from the House.
Do you renew your motion?
I renew my motion.
Thank you. Any discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 12 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, as every member wish to change their vote. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays.
House Bill 12, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 511 by Leader Gant and others relative to first-degree murder.
Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 511 on third and final consideration.
Leader Gant moves passage, proper second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Wish to roll Amendment Number 1 to the heel.
With that objection, roll to the hill. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 2.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 2 makes the bill. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move adoption of House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 2 and defer to the sponsor for the explanation.
Chairman Kershaw moves adoption of Amendment Number 2. Properly second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of Amendment Number 2 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that brings the body back to the heel of the amendments. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1 clarifies that an individual serving a sentence for life with the possibility of parole attains parole eligibility after 51 years of service rather than 25 years of service. With that explanation, Mr. Speaker, I move adoption of House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kershaw moves adoption amendment number 1, properly second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 51 raises the offense of murdering an on-duty first responder with targeted intent to an act of terrorism. We've seen an increase in disturbing attacks on first responders and law enforcement who have dedicated their lives to doing difficult, dangerous, and often thankless job to make our communities safer. This legislation sends a strong message of support to those brave men and women, but also makes very clear that targeting or killing a first responder will not be tolerated and will result in severe punishment. As amended, this bill adds new language under the current definition of terrorism that creates new protections for law enforcement, paramedics, firefighters, correctional officers, Department of Correction employees, and emergency medical rescue workers. If convicted, the perpetrator of such crime would receive life without parole or the death penalty. Once signed into law, House Bill 511 would be the nation's strongest legislation protecting first responders. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Leader Gant renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 511 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 88, no nays.
House Bill 511, I received constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Let the journal reflect. Representative Hicks of Hawkins is excused. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 512 by Leader Gant and others relative to sentencing of attempted first-degree murder.
Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 512 on third and final consideration.
Leader Gant moves passage, properly second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1 adds a comma after the word firefighter wherever it appears. With that explanation, Mr. Speaker, I move adoption of House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kershaw moves adoption amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor vote aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. You ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill simply adds life without parole as a possible sentencing option for an attempted first-degree murder of a first responder. I renew my motion.
Leader Gant renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor yield.
Leader Gant.
Yes.
Sponsor yield. I'm thinking of a situation, for an example, peaceful protesting, and there's a situation where it gets a little out of hand. It doesn't escalate to a riot. But if objects are thrown, let's say in a crowd of police officers, rocks, bricks, whatever, could that define, or could that be a definition of attempt?
Leader Gant.
I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure I understand your question. I can't see you. If the gentleman here could.
Representative Miller.
Thank you. Again, as an example, there's a peaceful protesting march or whatever. You would have police officers, and let's say objects are thrown, a brick, for an example. How do we define attempted murder in a situation like that? Or would it be defined?
Leader Gant.
Yeah, that's totally outside the scope of this, what this bill does.
Representative Miller.
Totally out of the scope? We're talking about attempted murder on a police officer, a firefighter, or anyone else.
Leader Gant.
It doesn't change the current definition of that.
Representative Miller.
So, in fact, an attempted murder charge could be defined as actually throwing an object at a police officer or a firefighter in a situation where there may be a protest march, a peaceful protest march.
Leader Gant.
No, sir, that would be under an assault.
Representative Miller.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion? Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Mr. Sponsor, as a retired firefighter, I think it's important that legislation is brought to protect first responders. But this legislation would also apply in situations of insurrection attempts, if or if our officers are, making sure that in every protest situation. Am I correct?
Leader Gant.
Yes, sir. No matter what political banner you fly, this would apply equally.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 512 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays.
House Bill 512, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1069 by Representative Eldridge, relative to goods manufactured by inmates.
Representative Eldridge, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1069 on third and final consideration.
Representative Eldridge moves passage. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kiesling, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Item number 10, our House State Government Committee Amendment number 1. We're going to defer to the sponsor for further explanation. We move to adopt, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Kiesling moves adoption of amendment number 1. Properly second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Eldridge, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1069 is to authorize Tricor directors to offset costs of incarceration by generating some revenue by making sales to governmental agencies and nonprofits. And with that, I renew my motion.
Representative Eldridge renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for this bill. Once upon a time in the state of Tennessee, our inmates made a lot of things and they gained valuable skills by learning to make a lot of different things. And the state of Tennessee utilized those goods and wares. Is this bill going to further that and increase that ability for our inmates to work and produce those types of goods?
Representative Eldridge.
Yes, sir, it is. They do make several items. This will allow them to market them like in our area, PAL agency. You might find the items in gift shops at your rest stops and that type of thing. But yes, it is.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Tricor is a great program. I'd love to see the expansion of that program. And I also saw language in here that would ensure that the inmates would receive a fair wage in making these. Is that accurate?
Representative Eldridge.
Yes, sir, that is accurate. They are paid a prevailing wage. That is correct.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this, sponsor.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1069 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 88, no nays, one present, not voting.
House Bill 1069 and received constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 428 by Chair Lady Littleton, relative to aggravated rape of a child. Mr. Speaker, Senate bill is on the desk.
Chair Lady Littleton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1117.
Chair Lady Littleton moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 1117, properly second without objection. So ordered. Chair Lady Littleton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1117 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Littleton moves passage of Senate Bill 1117 on third and final consideration, properly second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1 is in the Senate bill. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move to withdraw Amendment number 1.
Without objection, Amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Ms. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chair Lady Littleton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 2019, the aggravated rape of a child statute was amended to require the sentence would be life without parole. We left in the juveniles, so this would just take out the juveniles that once convicted, they would not be sentenced as an adult. And the sentencing range for the would be range 3 offender and can be between 15 to 60 years, depending on the prior criminal history. With that, I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Littleton renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1117, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
Senate Bill 1117 and received constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 402 by Chairman Kiesling, relative to off-highway vehicles. Mr. Speaker, Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Kiesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1046.
Chairman Kiesling moves substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1046, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Kiesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1046 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Kiesling moves passage of Senate Bill 1046 on third and final consideration. Properly second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Transportation Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Hey. Without objection, Amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Kiesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Tennessee Code 4725-19021, an all-terrain vehicle is classified as a motorized vehicle with a total dry weight of up to 2,500 pounds. Ladies and gentlemen, you all realize that we are in the electric age. Electric cars, well, of course, we're going to have electric all-terrain vehicles. With that, those vehicles have to be powered by batteries, don't they? So batteries they're heavy. So what we're doing is placing in statute, increasing that by 1,000 pounds. That will read a total weight of 3,500, along with a width of 80 inches. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll renew my motion, entertain any questions.
Chairman Kiesling renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1046, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member cast their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
Senate Bill 1046 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1042 by Chairman Kiesling relative to economically distressed counties.
Chairman Kiesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1042 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Kiesling moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of the amendment, and I defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Ms. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Kiesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will renew my motion.
Chairman Kiesling renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1042 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 89, no nays, 1 present, not voting.
House Bill 1042 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 764 by Representative Hicks and others relative to soil and water conservation. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Hicks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and form to Senate Bill 0719.
Representative Hicks moves substitute and form to Senate Bill 719, probably second. Without objection, so ordered. Representative Hicks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 0719 on third and final consideration.
Representative Hicks moves passage of Senate Bill 719 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Government Operations Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Reagan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment adds a requirement that the commission meet at least twice a year and changes some of the wording in order to clarify the rulemaking process specified in the bill. Move to adopt.
Chairman Reagan moves adoption of House Amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of adopting House Amendment number 1, vote aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. You adopted. Next amendment, Ms. Clerk.
House Amendment 2 by Leader Lamberth. Mr. Speaker, it was timely filed.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment simply states that existing soil and water conservation districts will continue to act in their capacity until the expiration of their terms. This was a clerical error that we caught after it came through the committee system. With that, move to adopt.
Leader Lamberth moves adoption amendment number 2, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Hicks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is updating an outdated 1939 statute dealing with soil conservation boards and the State Soil Conservation Committee. With that, I renew my motion.
Representative Hicks renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sponsor. I just want to get, I'm trying to figure out what is the reason behind replacing farmers to the representative seats with agriculture industry representatives. Can you just give me some background on that and explanation for it?
Representative Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This entire thing is just sort of new terminology. It's just modernizing and updating.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you. I just feel like the voices of farmers and the people who are on the ground doing this in the soil, as opposed to corporate CEOs, perhaps might have a better perspective. So I was just trying to get a better understanding of why they might be replaced. Thank you.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
With all due respect, my friend from Davidson County, that's not what's happening here. It's just a new terminology. Farming's a very intricate business in this day and age. And when I grew up on a farm, it was a relatively simple endeavor. But now farming is a business, big business many times. And sometimes even for what you may see out of the grocery store or out and about in town as a simple farmer, they may be running a multi-million-dollar business. It's very expensive to farm. It's very difficult. This terminology literally just updates those terms. So our farmers very much will still have a voice on this, and it is the intent of this legislation that they definitely will. It just updates the terminology. So I share your concern to make sure those voices are still there, and it definitely will be preserved.
Representative Clemens. All right. Any other discussion? Representative Holtzclaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hicks, this is your first bill.
Representative Hicks.
Yes, sir, it sure is.
Representative Holtzclaw.
So would you be considered one of the Hicks from East Tennessee?
Representative Hicks.
I am definitely from East Tennessee.
Representative Holtzclaw.
Well, you know, when you present a bill out of the well there, that it affects everybody in the great state of Tennessee. So you're supposed to be totally knowledgeable of the bill. Is that correct?
Representative Hicks.
That is correct. Thank you.
So can you recite for me the TCA Title IV code?
Representative Hicks.
No, sir, I sure can.
Representative Holtzclaw.
Also in this bill, it removes provisions to allow consortium associations to purchase equipment. Do you know what equipment they're allowed to purchase?
Representative Hicks.
Probably Bobcats and Mini X's. I don't know.
Representative Holtzclaw.
Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Hicks.
Before we go to the representative from Shelby County, anybody else have any questions? Representative Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it is my honor today to inquire about your first piece of legislation. Representative Hicks, my next door neighbor in the Cordell Hall building, and I got to tell you, the boy learned to whisper in a sawmill. I've never heard a louder, booming voice. I feel like I'm taking care of East Tennessee, Northeast Tennessee constituent issues. Bless his heart, he is so voracious in his wanting to serve. But I have a question. What's the difference between dirt and soil? I've always wondered about that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
This is about the only time you're going to have a free back and forth, sir.
I don't know the difference in between dirt and soil. I'd say there is no difference in between dirt and soil.
Okay, I was just asking for purposes, but I will have to say that you have caused more alarm for more of my constituents. I've been so worried about the last couple of weeks here. When I go home, I've got particularly this one constituent who is a little more progressive than I am, and she keeps fussing at me about you and the finance sub-chair. And she keeps talking about what you're trying to do to it, what you're trying to do to the people of District 95. And I was always confused by it. I say, what in the world is the problem? And then it struck me because she wasn't talking about the Hickses in Nashville. When she dropped the U Hicks in Nashville, I realized, oh, thank goodness it's not the finance chair and not my next door neighbor. But anyway, sir, congratulations on your first bill, and we look forward to hopefully passing it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Representative Towns.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Be cheerful, Mr. Speaker. Be cheerful. Mr. Hicks, Representative, do you believe in reincarnation?
No, sir.
Now, there was a Hicks that I served with in this house in the 90s. Are you that Hicks?
Representative Hicks.
I'm about as close as you can get.
Representative Towns.
So would you explain that to me? If you don't believe in reincarnation, how would you be that Hicks as close as you can get? Explain that to me in the body.
Representative Hicks.
My father served here from 94 to 98.
Representative Towns.
So you chip off the old block then.
Yes.
I knew your father was a great man. I enjoyed working with him. Congratulations on your first bill.
Thank you.
Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 719 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member casts a vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
Senate Bill 719 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 62 by Representative Carringer and others relative to adoption records. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Carringer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to SB 0723.
Representative Carringer moves substitute and form Senate Bill 723 without objection. So ordered. Representative Carringer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of SB 0723 on third and final consideration.
Representative Carringer moves passage of Senate Bill 723 on third and final consideration. Properly second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Carringer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill was brought to me by administration, and it is to delete, as introduced, to delete the adoption contact veto registry and revises other provisions governing adoption, amends TCA Title 36, Chapter 1, and Section 68-3-313. The bill removes the contact veto registry and the advance notice registry and makes other related changes to adoption records. So I renew my motion.
Representative Carringer renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Spicky.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Carringer, with this important piece of legislation you have, I think we need ample time to discuss this on the House floor. So, Mr. Speaker, I make a motion to roll this to the Hill.
Without objection, any objection, roll to the Hill. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 586 by Speaker Pro Tem Marsh relative to wastewater facility revolving loan fund. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 428.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 428. Properly second without objection. So ordered. Speaker Pro Tem Marsh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 428 on third and final consideration.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh moves passage of Senate Bill 428 on third and final consideration. Properly second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee Amendment Number 1, same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Halford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's same as the Senate amendment. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment Number 1 is withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill tracks the 2015 drinking water statute and allows a privately owned community wastewater treatment system subject to regulation by the Tennessee Public Utilities Commission to apply for a loan from the state's revolving fund for wastewater. With that, I'll renew my motion.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 428, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member cast their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 83, 6 nays.
Senate Bill 428 received constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1163 by Leader Lamberth and others relative to local health services. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1368.
Leader Lamberth moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 1368. Probably second without objection. So ordered. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1368 in third and final consideration.
Leader Lamberth moves passage of Senate Bill 1368 on third and final consideration. Properly second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment Number 1. Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment Number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is very straightforward. It does not allow the County Board of Health or the health departments in the county to regulate agriculture. They are regulated by a different department, both federal and state, unless it's otherwise authorized by state law. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Leader Lamberth renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1368 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 88, one nay.
Senate Bill 1368 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Follow up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 478 by Leader Lamberth relative to juvenile justice. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1286.
Leader Lamberth moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 1286 without objection. So ordered. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1286 on third and final consideration.
Leader Lamberth moves passage of Senate Bill 1286 on third and final consideration. Properly second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, this bill comes from my local chief of police and local juvenile court judge. A few years ago, we actually passed a bill in this chamber and in the other chamber that was signed into law that dealt with juvenile justice. And the attempt was to update our juvenile justice code so that juveniles are getting the assistance that they need within the juvenile justice system. Unfortunately, we probably went a little farther than we needed to, and more children that commit certain crimes are being transferred to criminal court than really our juvenile court judges or law enforcement are comfortable with. These children really should stay within the juvenile court system and get the services that they need there instead of being transferred to adult court. And it leaves that as an option. But I want to be clear, our goal is that these children would remain in juvenile court so that they can hopefully become productive adults. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Leader Lamberth renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Stewart, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
Leader Lamberth.
Yes, sir.
Representative Stewart.
It looks to me, is this what this bill does? It looks to me like right now, to detain a juvenile, the law says that you can detain a juvenile and place them in a shelter if there's probable cause to believe the child has committed a delinquent offense constituting a crime against a person resulting in serious injury or death, or the likelihood of that. And we're adding, in addition, the crimes burglary, aggravated burglary, car theft, and a few other items. Is that what we're doing? We're saying there's more things that a juvenile can be detained for?
Leader Lamberth.
Yes, sir. That way they remain in the juvenile justice system. So if a judge has no option to have them detained within the juvenile justice system, then the only other option that they have available to them is to actually transfer that case to criminal court where they risk going to an adult prison. And so the goal here is to make sure specifically on these types of crimes that they would remain in the juvenile justice system, not go into the adult system. Yes, sir.
Representative Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Here's my confusion. I mean, this whole section of the code is about detention or shelter of a child prior to a hearing of the petition. So to me, and that's, I think, why the law is so specific and says that you can't detain a child under those circumstances in an institution unless they've done something that could kill somebody or injure somebody. Aren't we just dramatically expanding the number of instances where a child can be detained prior to a trial, prior to a hearing with this law if it passes?
Leader Lamberth. No. Representative Stewart.
Well, that's exactly what we're doing. We're expanding. What we're saying is right now, you have to have a violent crime. A child has to be accused of a violent crime to justify detention in a juvenile detention facility. What we're doing with passing this law is we're saying now if a child steals a car, or actually it doesn't steal a car, but is accused of stealing a car, this is pretrial. If a child is accused of burglary, then they can now be detained in a juvenile detention facility. I think that's not a very good change to the law, because what that means is people get in some sort of dispute, someone swears out a warrant, this child stole my lawnmower, And now that child can be set in a juvenile detention facility under this bill, and that's not the case today. Today, unless a child commits a murder, is associated with a serious violent crime, they can't be put in a detention facility. Sir, I think this is an extraordinary expansion of the law. It doesn't have anything to do with keeping people out of adult court. And this is going to have momentous consequences for the children of our state. If anything I said is inaccurate, I'd certainly welcome the sponsor to explain it, but I think the law is pretty clear, the law we're changing, and the bill, which has not been amended, is very clear. So, sir, I think this takes us down the wrong road. I think this is going to lead to a lot of extra children put in the prison system, or rather the local system of juvenile detention centers, and I think it's not the way we should be headed in this state.
Lear Lambert.
To my friend from Davidson County, everything you'd said was wrong, and with all due respect, virtually all of it was. I respect you, and I know that you don't spend a lot of time in juvenile court. I don't spend an enormous amount of time there myself, but I have spoken to the folks that are there every day. And unfortunately, a byproduct of what was a well-intentioned bill several years ago is the opposite of what you've described. Children are not getting the services. Sometimes that services is detention. If a child commits a robbery and goes in with a gun and robs a store or a clerk or something like that, that's a very serious crime. And I'm not saying they can't be transferred to adult court, but we're giving that judge the option. And again, these are judges that do this every single day that came to me and said, look at the docket, look at the cases we have handled. If we tie their hands, I trust our elected judges, and I've heard you make these speeches many times on the floor that you do as well. This gives those juvenile judges the discretion to decide, does that child need to be in detention or not? I would hope that they would find a multitude of other services that are all still available right now to them, but it does allow them to keep that child in detention or not in juvenile court. Because if you cut that off, again, specifically, we're not talking about stealing lawnmowers here, unless you want to consider that a motor vehicle, which it is not. We're literally talking about robbery, aggravated burglary, especially aggravated burglary, aggravated robbery, especially aggravated robbery, theft of motor vehicle, carjacking. I mean, these are very serious crimes. But even so, when committed by a juvenile, the intention, and I want to be clear, the intent of this bill is that those children would stay in juvenile court and get juvenile services instead of just being transferred up to adult court like any 30-year-old would be. So again, I trust our judges. I trust their discretion. They're elected to make these decisions, and they're the ones sitting there looking at the child. And so that's what this grants them the ability to do, is have additional judicial discretion.
Representative Stewart.
And we're obviously in disagreement. I guess my concern is that the language of the statute that we are passing or not passing will take a statute that right now requires a showing of potential of violent crime, a crime of violence, or a murder. A statute which would right now cover the circumstance you're talking about, someone walking in a store with a gun. And we're now expanding that to nonviolent crimes. That's a very significant expansion of the law. And it means more juveniles are going to be put in the juvenile detention system in a way that they have not been before. I don't think that's good for the juveniles. I don't think it's good for the state of Tennessee, because, of course, we know every juvenile who gets caught in this system, that's a person who's on the track to potential criminality down the road. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With sponsor yield.
Leader Lambert.
Leader Lambert, let me read part of what's in I'm assuming the language in the bill. The court may order the delinquent child to participate in the programming at a non-residential facilities for delinquent children operated under the direction of the court or other local public authorities after the period of detention. Could you explain to me exactly
Leader Lambert,
what programming are we talking about?
Yes, sir. There are a multitude of programs. There's teen court, there's treatment programs that they can participate in. There's programs so they can get guidance from other either teens or adults. I mean, there are all kinds of options when you remain in the juvenile system. But again, the current law for these type of crimes They can't detain them. They can't keep them in the juvenile system. They're not allowed to put them into these type of programs. This bill for those crimes allows these judges to make that decision. So all of those programs that would be available to any juvenile that had committed a misdemeanor would be available to juveniles that have committed these types of crimes. Now, they're still held accountable, and some of these juveniles may still be transferred up to adult court. But the hope is that the vast majority would still remain in juvenile court and take advantage of those multitude of services, because there's a reason that kid has committed a burglary. There's a reason that kid has committed a robbery. They didn't just wake up one day at 15 years old and say, I'm going to go rob a liquor store. I mean, what happened to get that kid to that point? What's going on at home or not going on at home? Our juvenile judges should be able to make that decision. And that paragraph you just read is exactly the goal of this bill. Hold those children accountable. When appropriate, fine, transfer them to adult court. But when appropriate, keep them in the juvenile system and take advantage of that plethora of options that are out there for juveniles.
Representative Miller.
Thank you. After listening to Representative Stewart, my question is in reference to juvenile justice reform. Does this bill have anything to do with juvenile justice reform and prevention of children getting inside the system up front?
Lear Lambert.
Yes, it goes right to the heart of that, because when you have children that are committing serious crimes, it is a very difficult thing for the court system. It's really hard to just draw a line in the sand at 18 and say, well, everybody over 18 is going to go to prison. Everybody under 18 is not. It is such an individualized assessment. That's why we have elected judges. These juvenile judges do that every single day. They work with law enforcement, the district attorney's office, private counsel, and public defenders to try to figure out, is there a way that you can take a kid, even one that's committed serious crimes like this, and fashion a remedy so that they don't wind up a career criminal? This goes directly to juvenile justice reform on trying to figure out where is the right line for that. Which types of crimes should they be able to handle in juvenile court and which should they not? But we want them held accountable for their actions. These children potentially have committed these types of crimes. And so we want them held accountable, but at what level? And this gives greater options.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Leader Lambert.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objections to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1286, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 70, 20 nays.
Senate Bill 1286, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Let journal reflect Representatives Boyd and Hurt are excused. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 830 by Chairman Kumar relative to consumer protection.
Chairman Kumar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for passage of House Bill 830 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Kumar moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Commerce Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Vaughn moves adoption of House Amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of House Amendment number 1 say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt the next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Kumar, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, this House Bill 830 provides the same consumer protections to buyers of farm machinery that are available to buyers of motor vehicles. In brief, this is the lemon law for tractors and farm machinery. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Kumar renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chairman Kumar, I just want to thank you for bringing this. I've had several cases where there have been tractors that have been bought new, and it was a gray area whether or not the lemon law covered them or not. And I appreciate you clarifying this for all the farmers and the people who are buying tractors out there. Thank you very much.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 830 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 87, no nays.
House Bill 830 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 61 by Representative Darby and others relative to food, drug, and cosmetic safety. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Darby, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to SB 0718.
Representative Darby moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 718, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Darby, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of SB 0718 on third and final consideration.
Representative Darby moves passage of Senate Bill 718 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Government Operations Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment replaces the word regulation with the word rule for the purposes of clarity and consistency in code.
Chairman Reagan moves adoption of House Amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of adopting House Amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
No further amendments, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Darby, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a amend bill that rewrites the enforcement sections of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act passed in 1941 by deleting antiquated language and updated provisions to reflect current practices. I renew my motion.
Representative Darby renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection? No. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 89, no nays.
Senate Bill 718 and received constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 384 by Chairman Crawford and others relative to missing and endangered children. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 327.
Chairman Crawford moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 327 without objection. So ordered. Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 327 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Crawford moves passage of Senate Bill 327 on third and final consideration. By second, Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I am presenting Evelyn's Law. This is House Bill 384, Senate Bill 327. This was a tragedy that happened back in our region, Northeast Tennessee. And as you can see, it was a combined effort from all the reps and the senators from that area. This was the vision of former Representative Timothy Hill, who is with us today. And he carried this bill and got it through the House, and then it was not took up due to COVID in the Senate. So I picked it up this year. We had a very bad incident with a 15-month-old baby. The baby had not been seen in several months and had not been reported to local law enforcement. And it did not end well. Our community did everything we possibly could, from searches to talking to people. And we had hope that we would find this little baby. But we didn't. She was murdered. And the family members, the mother, they were questioned, and they were told that the baby was on vacation with a friend, or the baby was with the grandmother in a different state, and all this. This went on for months. Cost the counties, cost the state a lot of money getting the runaround. And we felt like our hands were tied. We didn't know what we could do. So we met with the local law enforcement, and they told us, hey, there's really nothing on the books that would help us make a difference in this case, but we feel like you all can do this. And so we got Evelyn's Law together, and basically it requires a parent or a legal guardian to report a missing minor, that's 12 and under, to local law enforcement or TBI if it's been missing 24 hours. If that baby is found or that minor is found with serious bodily harm or dead, then there's a higher penalty for it. Won't make a difference in Evelyn Boswell's life and our community, but hopefully it'll keep you guys from having to experience this in your county. But anyway, it's a joint effort. I'm very proud to present this bill. Again, it was a joint effort started by former Rep. Timothy Hill and all of us, and we're proud to present this bill to you today. I renew my motion, sir.
Chairman Crawford renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 327, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
Senate Bill 327, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 225 by Chairman Vaughn and others.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members, for that kind ovation. Mr. Speaker, I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 103.
Chairman Vaughn moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 103, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 103 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Vaughn moves passage of Senate Bill 103 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next minute, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, what this bill does is this returns authority for control of opening and closing schools to locally elected school boards, regardless of the situation. These local school boards control now when their schools are open in times of when they think that there's peril for their students with regards to weather or other illnesses. It shouldn't be any different during the pandemic. And that is what this bill seeks to do. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Vaughn renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Chairman, you've done an excellent job this year of asking questions to other members, and there are 10 freshmen on the floor right now. And if any of you guys are brave enough, this is your only chance.
Any further discussion? Representative Parkinson at Representative White's desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Chairman. I just want to, I was over here discussing with the chairman just to make sure that this is true local control of that decision making.
Chairman Vaughn.
That is indeed the case to my colleague from Shelby County. But allow me to point out the fact that there is one caveat in here, because occasionally, as people view things through different prisms, we did leave in here that notwithstanding subsection B, during an emergency, if the governor issues an executive order with statewide applicability that requires schools to be open for in-person learning and instruction, then that executive order would supersede this bill. It would go back to being the way that it is today.
Representative.
And thank you for the rest of the story. Thank you.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker Sexton. To the sponsor, that part of the bill that you just addressed, how is that different from the authority of the governor through executive orders today relative to opening and closing schools?
Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this bill will do will place the ability or the right to close schools solely in the local school board's hands. The governor's executive orders would not affect the closing of schools. He
Representative
would,
Hardaway.
he would only retain the ability to order in-person learning back.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, sir. So the school board would still have the authority to close the schools, but the governor could override that closure and through executive order, open the schools right back up.
Chairman Vaughn.
That is correct, sir, exactly as it is today.
Representative Hardaway.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sponsor.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 103 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, the same member which changed their vote. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 85, 2 nays, 1 present not voting.
Senate Bill 103, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 230 by Chairman Vaughn, relative to personal appearance requirements.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 230 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Vaughn moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Local Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt.
Chairman Crawford moves adoption. Amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, this bill places the determination of whether a taxpayer appears in front of a board of assessment virtually at the sole decision of the taxpayer themselves. We've in my neck of the woods, we've seen a huge reappraisal that's come through. There are people who have varying concerns about being out in public. And so what this does is this requires the boards of equalization to allow people to appear virtually. And that's all. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Vaughn renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 230 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, the same member which changed their vote. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 87, no nays, 1 present not voted.
House Bill 230, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1112 by Chairman Vaughn and others, relative to the requirements placed on contractors under public contracts.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, I move passage of House Bill 1112 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Vaughn moves passage. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1112 will provide consistency on job sites throughout the state, regardless of what jurisdiction they're in. It'll make sure that we have consistent regulatory standards for safety, consistent with the federal and state occupational safety and health administration. With that, sir, I renew my motion.
Chairman Vaughn renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1112, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, the same member which changed their vote. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 71, 18 nays.
House Bill 1112 receiving constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 796 by Chairman Howell, relative to incentive programs. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 372.
Chairman Howell moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 372 without objection. So ordered. Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I move passage of Senate Bill 372 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Howell moves passage of Senate Bill 372 on third and final consideration. Properly second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill was brought to me by the Treasury Department in Tennessee. As background, the Treasury Department is responsible for settling all claims against the various Tennessee government agencies and departments. That includes our institutions of higher education. In order to process a claim, the Department of Treasury must investigate, and part of that investigation includes getting a response from the department to which the claim is lodged against. By statute, the Treasury Department has 90 days to settle and clear that claim. This bill simply gives the Treasury Department the authority to create a program that will incentivize the departments to respond to that claim in a timely manner so that they can settle it statutorily within 90 days. It's an attempt to make government more responsive to our citizens. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew our motion.
Chairman Howell renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 372 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays.
Senate Bill 372, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 85 by Chair Lady Hazelwood and others relative to sales tax.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 85 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Finance, Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chair Baum, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of the amendment and defer to the sponsor for explanation.
Vice Chairman Baum moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill comes from the Department of Revenue, and it addresses the streamlined sales and use tax agreement provisions that are currently set to take effect on July 1st of 2021. Tennessee, as those of you who've been in this body before will remember, we're an associate member of the SSUTA, and we have proposed an extension to these provisions every 2 years since 2005. But this time, unlike in previous years, we have the benefit of the Wayfair decision from the Supreme Court that authorized states to require sales tax collections from out-of-state sellers. So this legislation will delete the proposed provisions that those that would be deleted include the definitions and administrative provisions that are no longer necessary unless Tennessee is a full streamlined member, and we don't need to do that because of Wayfair. These provisions would have a negative effect on tax administration in our state and on our taxpayers. Deleting them is going to allow the department to continue to serve the taxpayers of Tennessee with a straightforward, understandable tax code. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Hazelwood renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's a mirage that I'm asking a lot of questions today. It's not really happening, just so you know. And to the sponsor, this issue came up, the Wayfair issue came up in TASER. And so I just want to see, how does your bill decide how the locals are going to get their share of their tax, or is it something that is not outside of that scope?
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
It is outside that scope.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very good. Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 85 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays.
House Bill 85 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call bill. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1040 by Chairman Faison and others, relative to services provided to the state by state officials and employees.
Chairman Faison, at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I request to roll that till Thursday's calendar of next week.
Without objection, roll it to Thursday next week. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 177 by Representative Russell, relative to rental property. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 459.
Representative Russell moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 459, probably second. Without objection, so ordered. Representative Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 459 on third and final consideration.
Representative Russell moves passage of Senate Bill 459 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment Number 1. Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, sir. It's the same as the Senate Amendment 1, so therefore I move to withdraw House Amendment Number 1 from the Commerce Committee.
Without objection, Amendment Number 1 is withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 177 authorizes property managers to bring or to testify against tenants in the same manner as landlords or owners of rental property. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Russell renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 459, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 81, 1 nay, 4 present, not voted.
Senate Bill 459 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that brings the House back to the heel of the calendar. That brings the House back to item 15, previously substituted and conformed. Mr. Speaker, we're on Senate Bill 723 by Representative Carringer, relative to adoption records.
Representative Carringer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion that I made probably an hour or so ago.
Representative Carringer renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I have to say that to my garrulous friend from Knox County, the loquacious one, you've made quite an impact on a number of the members around, and I think I understand that Representative Wright is still, I think he served with you on the county commission, and from that standpoint, I understand he just doesn't talk that much anymore because he never could. Somebody else used all the airtime. He just kind of looks and nods, and that's about it. But as I look and I try to learn who our new members are, I saw that you were a member, that you'd received your degree in communications, and you are quite the communicator. I was wondering, did you ever take a class in word conservation? I don't think they offered those. And then the last thing I was pointed out is again, when I looked at your bio, I was struck at how successful your family. I know you got to be so proud of your family. There's 2 doctors and an attorney in there, and that just begs to two attorneys. So that just begs to ask.
And a nurse practitioner.
And here you are.
And here I am. What did I say about this?
What happened? No, you have made quite an impact on all of us. Your passion is obvious through any time you participate in a discussion. Your energy is infectious, and so we look forward to seeing how quickly we can wrap up this bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Vaughn.
Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 723, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 88, no nays.
Senate Bill 723 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the regular calendar.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a message calendar.
Call up next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 50 by Representative Leader Lamberth and others relative to criminal offenses. Mr. Speaker, on March 18th, 2021, the Senate substituted House Bill 50 for Senate Bill 189, adopted Amendment 1, and passed House Bill 50 as amended.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I normally do not like to concur with the Senate, especially this early in the session, but they purported to correct a reference to the Post Commission, which we had already corrected. So since we had already taken care of the problem that they thought they were taking care of, in due respect to the esteemed Senate who we dearly love, I move to concur.
Leader Lamberth moves to concur in Senate Amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Amendment number 1, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Take the vote, Mr. Clerk.
Ayes 86, no nays.
Senate Amendment number 1 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare it concurred in. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 131 by Chair Lady Hazelwood and others relative to sales tax. Mr. Speaker, on March 18, 2021, the Senate substituted House Bill 131 for Senate Bill 215, adopted Amendment number 1, and passed House Bill 131 as amended.
Chairman Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate simply added railroads to the categories that we had previously discussed, underground utility and energy companies, and clarifying what is and is not real property for tax purposes. With that, Mr. Speaker, I move to concur.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves to concur in Senate Amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Amendment number 1, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change the vote? Take the vote, Mr. Clerk.
Ayes 88, no nays.
Senate Amendment number 1 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare it concurred in. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the message calendar.
Next order of business.
Unfinished business.
Unfinished business. Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, there are several procedural motions that I've discussed with Leader Camper and with the clerk and the committee chairman. These are all just bills that miss deadlines in order to be on notice for next week. And so again, to keep all of your bills moving along, and any member can request this, that's what the next few motions here are doing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that House Bill 506 be heard in the Public Service Subcommittee next week.
You've heard the motion. Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that HJR 139 be heard in the Agriculture and Natural Resources Subcommittee next week.
You've heard the motion. Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that House Bill 784 and 785 be heard in the Government Operations Committee next week.
You heard the motion. Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Bill 219 be heard in the Finance Subcommittee next week.
You've heard the motion. Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that House Bill 935 be heard in the Banking and Consumer Subcommittee next week.
You've heard the motion. Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that House Bill 1101 be heard in the Higher Education Subcommittee next week.
You've heard the motion. Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Announcements.
Announcements. Any announcements? Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Finance Subcommittee will consider the sports facility calendar next Wednesday, April 7th.
Thank you. Chairman Rudd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the final calendar of Elections and Campaign Finance Subcommittee will be April 14th. Deadline for bills to be put on notice to be heard this year will be Wednesday, April 7th at 3:30. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman HULSEY, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The State Corrections Subcommittee will have its final calendar on Tuesday, April 6th, which means any bills to be heard this year must be on notice by 3:30 p.m. this coming Wednesday, March 31st.
Representative Towns, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, come back to me later, please. Come back later.
Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Finance Appropriations Subcommittee will hold hearings on your appropriations amendment request beginning on Monday, March 29th at 3:30 and continued on Tuesday, March 30th at 4:30, both in House Hearing Room 1. During these hearings, members will have the opportunity to present their appropriation amendments requests in order that they must arrive to the hearing and present those. We encourage the members to try to find a time in either one of these times so that we can get through these hundreds of appropriation amendments. You can practice your 30-second elevator speeches over the weekend. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the Government Operations Committee will hold our monthly joint rule review meeting this upcoming Monday, March 29th at 11 a.m. in House Hearing Room 1. Again, that's our joint rule review meeting for House Hearing Room 1 at 11 a.m. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Carr, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Property and Planning Subcommittee of the Local Committee will have its last final calendar, April the 13th. Deadline for bills to be put on notice be April the 7th at 3:30 p.m.
Chairman Wendell, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, members, the final calendar for the House Naming and Designated Committee will be on Friday, April the 13th, which means the deadline will be on April the 7th at 3:30. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Parkinson, you're recognized. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Vice Chairman Howe, if you don't mind, and Leader Love and Chairman. After consulting with both leaders and the caucus, the most bipartisan caucus in this chamber, we've decided that the Seersucker Caucus will convene on Easter Monday. Please come prepared and come dressed appropriately. And that is the Monday after Easter, April 5th. And I'll open for any questions, Mr. Speaker.
No questions. Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I inadvertently confused folks. I said the correct date for the sports facility calendar. That's Wednesday, April 7th. Week after next, Wednesday, April 7th, we'll be doing the sports facility calendar and finance sub. Thank you.
Representative Towns, we're back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to the members from Shelby County headed west, I don't know if you all have checked the weather, but the weather is really, really ugly. I would advise everyone check it going back home and make an informed decision as to whether you want to traverse back in that severe weather as they categorize it. Just to FYI. And the ones that are traveling east, safe passes as well.
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, House Bills 1226, 787, and 30 were issued initially on the corrections sub-calendar last evening. Those items were calendared in error, and they will not be considered by corrections sub this coming week.
Thank you. Any further announcements? Let the journal reflect that Representative Griffey is hereby removed as member of the Civil Justice Committee, the Criminal Justice Committee, and the Education Instruction Committee. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Roll call.
Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 86 members present.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
That completes the regular order, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess until 5 p.m. on Monday, March 29th, 2021.
Without objection, the House stands in recess till 5 p.m. on Monday, March 29th, 2021.